Nancy, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
I am so glad that you're here. We talked for like a good half hour before we hit record because there was a lot to catch up on.
Yes.
But I'm excited that you are here on the podcast talking all things motherhood and ministry and this elusive balance that so many people find themselves in of following their calling, working for the local church, but also feeling this tug to be with their kids all the time and be home, and this struggle of I'm going to ruin my kids because we're heavily involved in the local church and it's hard. And so I thought you'd be the perfect person to have this conversation with. And so why don't
Thank
you
you.
briefly let people know a little bit about who you are and what you currently do in ministry?
Okay. Let's see. My name is Nancy. Thanks for having me, Lauren. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on for a mom discussion because I am passionate about that and I love my ladies. So I have 4 daughters. They are now 23, 21, and 2 19-year-olds. Not twins. We grew our family through the foster care system when our youngest was 13. So she joined our family 17. She joined our family 7 years ago. So my background in ministry is I actually have been in ministry for a long time, and I grew up serving the church because my parents they served in the church. I was one of those high school babies that was passed around in the high school ministry because my parents were serving there. Then I get older and I get a degree in theater to put kids on stage and to put kids into local churches during the summer. So public schools during the year, connect them to a church. And so it's always been my ministry to work with kids. I will say that, having kids myself changed some of it. I shifted from theater into more like the weekend ministries. Started at my first church as a kids director and have worked at a few different churches and a few different denominations. And from here to Atlanta, Georgia, story for another time. But my kids have always been a part of it. So when they were younger, we had the 3 girls in 3.5 years. And my mom had also been a kids director and was always in ministry. And so, I have that kind of that perspective too, with the mom in ministry and raising my kids in ministry. So, and what
Yes.
do I do
And
now?
you,
I'm a
yeah, what
kids
do you do
director
now?
still. I'm still a kids director. I know. Yes. So.
Okay, great. So you're still a kids director. You've been doing this for so many years. You were my kids director growing up, which people
Yay.
know that by now because I talk about it
Uh-huh.
in the intro of this episode. And you have taught me so much when it comes to raising kids in ministry, because oftentimes you would invite me into what you were doing with your girls. And it was like, hop in the car. We're going to go to Costco or go run errands, or
Yeah.
I babysat for you countless times, and I just got a front row seat on how you did this. And so I want to kind of talk about this balance idea, because I think sometimes people strive to find balance. They strive to find this perfect where I do this so many hours a week, I'm home so many hours a week. And if you've been in ministry for any amount of time, you know that ministry is not just a 9 to 5 job. It often bleeds into the evenings and early mornings and the weekends. And this idea of finding balance can feel impossible. And so people end up chasing this idea of balance only to never reach it. And so for you, as you think back to having your girls and working in the church, what did balance look like for you? Did you ever find yourself chasing balance, or did you just say, this is our life, that's just going to be this weird schedule?
Yeah, I think balance is kind of a loaded word. It gives people a place to fail and to succeed. But if you set up your own balance and you're like, this is what I'm going to do, and then you have kids and everything changes, then you have this perspective of it wasn't successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, my I would describe myself as having a really big faith, almost to a fault, in the sense that my kids were the kind of kids that were always at the church, and I would all of a sudden go, oh my goodness, that's right. Guess I should check on them. I had this enormous, like, these people here are going to be a part of my kids' lives. So if I don't see my kids, I know they're being watched by someone. So, there was kind of that perspective. There was also an importance in my kids finding a home at the church and being comfortable there. I had a gift of 4 years working at a church in Cyprus where the girls got to be in the school that was on the campus of the church. And so we even had that experience where we'd all go together, they'd go to school, and then at 3:00 when the bell rang, they would walk to my office and be a part of everything that happened after 3:00. And so they basically lived at the church. When they were really young and I was trying to decide if I was going to do full-time, part-time, all of that kind of stuff, it really depended on how they were doing each year. I think that looking back, I knew what my calling was. I knew what God had designed me to do. I knew what I was good at, but I also knew that they were my first ministry. And that family had to be a part of that, and then, I know we can edit this part out. Silence. I forgot what the other part was I was going to say.
That's okay.
Do you want me to end it? Well,
yeah, go ahead. Keep talking.
Yeah, the kids were known. My kids were known. Everybody knew who they were, and also, one of the things I was thinking about and talking to you today, there's been so many different influences on how to raise kids. And I would say I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of leaders. It was very important to me to do my best, but I also knew that my gut was the Holy Spirit. So I trusted that. So I would read an entire book on something and then I would be like, wait, none of it feels good to me except for this one part. And I would take the one part and implement it in my family. And it's kind of like the email you just wrote. It needs to be where you are listening to the right leaders and the right things from each of the leaders. And so, Michelle Anthony had that book, Spiritual Parenting. And not all of it resonated with me because but one of the parts that did, which was my kids were not going to be perfect. They were not. I wanted my kids to be known, to be loved, to be comfortable, and to know that that's what Jesus was about and that God had called me to this. And I wanted them to be honored, to be a part of my calling. But Abigail, my middle daughter, never had shoes on. And the whole church knew that. And they would find her shoes everywhere in the church and they would just bring them to me. But I never turned around and made her in trouble for taking off her shoes someplace random at church, so that would be my major example about it. These perfect kids where they're always dressed nice. Now, yes, my kids were always matching, but that was me.
Yeah.
But it probably, and I look back on it and I think it was because it was easier than trying to find 3 different outfits. It was just super easy. Oh, 3 matching outfits. Yeah. Here we go. Anyway, but just little things like that. She wasn't reprimanded for taking off her shoes because she literally took it off. That's just who she was. Yeah. Loved to be barefoot. And so if we're going to be at the church this many hours, she's going to be able to be barefoot sometimes, Yeah. Anyway, so that's my little.
Yeah, that is so funny. And I'm thinking back, I'm yeah, she was always bare. I'm she just didn't have shoes. Okay, I want to keep talking on this idea of perfect kids. Cause even me, obviously my kids are 7 and 4. And I really like when people come up to me and they say, your kids love Jesus so much. And I can easily become extremely prideful of look at all that I'm doing in my home to disciple my kids so that they know the memory verse and can tell you the gospel finger play things and all the things. And then on Sunday, we walk into the kids' hallway and Noah, Noah, my 4-year-old, standing in the middle of the hallway, yells, "Holy shoot." Just yells it. And of course, it doesn't sound like the word shoot. It sounds like a different word. And I'm everyone just heard you say that. And I'm one, I don't know where you heard that too, but it just was such a humbling moment for me because it just was like, okay, he's 4. And I think he was appalled at how many people were standing in the hallway because he was like, there's so many people here.
Oh, that's what he was reacting to. I love it. Which of course means it was
And
a full hallway.
yes, it was a full hallway of people who were
Everyone
probably
heard it.
not
Yes,
listening, but in my brain, everybody heard him.
absolutely.
And so there's just this like dynamic of I want my kid. I feel like as a kids ministry leader, I should be leading my kids. And at the same time, it's a humbling reminder to say, well, I can't save my kids. That's something that I cannot do. And
Exactly.
I can pray for it to happen, and I can create an environment where they learn and grow and can ask questions. But ultimately, I can't be the one to save them. And I think sometimes when you're in ministry, you want the picture perfect family. You want the Instagram worthy pictures and the Christmas cards and all the things to kind of prove to everyone in your church that, like, oh, you should be leading this ministry because your family looks like this. And knowing your daughters and knowing who they are now as young adults, um, how did you navigate that tension of like, my daughter's running around with no shoes on, or she's struggling with doubt and is not sure that she
Mm-hmm.
believes the Bible is true? Like, all of those things can happen for kids ministry leaders who are raising kids. And so how did you navigate those feelings when they came up of like, oh, we clearly in this moment don't look very put together?
Right. Yes. Okay. That's such a great question. That's such a great story because I can totally picture Noah doing that. And it's just for you, it is humbling. It is. God does
Mm-hmm.
that for us just every once in a while. But no, I would say that especially to this generation of parents, um, but for me, even, I was very authentic. So if my kids did the unthinkable, I was um I was just the one who kind of like, I would be mortified, don't get me wrong, but I would also be able to laugh it off and be able to say it's a story to tell, like today, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
story, but it happens to everyone. And I think that there's even more value, especially today, but just in the sense of, oh, she's a real family. She's real. Their family's normal. Her kids are in schools that the kids probably heard something. They have friends in the neighborhood. Um, it doesn't, I know we think that it always comes from home. Oh, they must hear that at home or they must say that at home, right? But that's not true. And it gives other people the opportunity to feel like a life in ministry, a life raising their kids to love Jesus is going to be messy, and it's okay. I know that, some of those things that we've tried to shift away from is that idea of the leader having to be the one who prays, the pastor having to be the one who prays, and trying to shift everybody into, no, no, you talk to God, you be. Um, I think moments like that show them that they can do real life and love
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. So I think they're very important moments. So part of how I survived them though is I took a lot of pictures. I think I've shared this with you before. I took a lot of pictures and I had this little book next to the front door. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime my kids did something mortifying like that, we didn't have the lovely, like, write it in your cell phones, but I had this purple journal, and every time my kids would do something that was just unbelievably hilarious, or, I would write it in this book. Well, the book later became this amazing, fun thing that my kids and I read all the time. Like, it's hilarious. But I didn't, so I would write it down for the future. And I didn't realize I was really doing that, but it was also for me. It was for me
Mm-hmm.
to get it out of my head and put it someplace was, um, that was kind of like more tangible, like, oh, this is a real life situation instead of being inside of me and I'm embarrassed. But hey,
Mm-hmm.
put it out here. But also, like, I took pictures, not of that moment because obviously it was words, but if my kids would do something, anything crazy, I would take a picture of them. And I have, because I'm very dramatic. I am
Yes.
very dramatic. I am a theater person. I am a dramatic, over the top kind of person. And so for me to not react was always something I had to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And one quick story, Abby, I gotta say it was Abby. It might have been Lindy, but I feel like they were the only ones that ever did anything crazy. But Lindy whoever it was walked me into the other room this one time and said on the way, Mom, you're going to say, but just wait, I'll explain it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And we walk around the corner and like all of the laundry baskets had been dumped upside down and the laundry baskets were in like a whatever. And I was like, oh, and I looked at her and laughed so hard because she knew exactly what I was going to do, right? The reaction. And that was such a lesson to me that it was like, oh my gosh, they're watching my reactions
Mm-hmm.
and they know them. I need to practice reactions so that I don't turn their doubts away. So I don't turn their questions away. So I don't turn their, obviously my reactions were not so dramatic that she wouldn't still do what she was doing because she just told me what I was
Right.
going to do and she took me in another room anyway. But they were, but I know that that's part of what I started practicing. So
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely say that to moms now. Practice your reactions. Your reaction to what he did in the hall is what's going to make a difference in his heart and not the rest of the people in the room, which is
Yeah.
so hard because that's all we want to do is think of the modeling that we're doing for not only him, but everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I used
Gosh,
a
that's
lot of
so true.
words.
Of just like, especially when you're at church, because there's been so many parenting moments that have happened at church
Mm-hmm.
where they get caught sneaking candy or they're running around the lobby and it's too crowded to run around the lobby in the moment, or they're screaming, like
Yeah.
so much screaming at church sometimes. And it is that like you want to practice that like perfect, like
This is
parenting,
how we
discipling
behave. This is how,
moment.
right, right, right.
Yeah, but it's like you want other people to see you parenting your kids in a way that's worth modeling.
Yes.
And sometimes like I just don't think that is healthy and is something that like God's not asking us to do that. Now, of course, it's like you don't want to be like yelling at your kids at church, but there is this mentality of like it doesn't have to be perfect. And I think one thing that I watched you do sometimes as your girls got older, you gave them the option to not be at service every single service.
Mm-hmm.
Like you always gave your girls the option of like, no, you attend a service and you can serve one if you want, but also you can go sit in my office.
Yes. So true.
And I think that is it's such a good way of handling kids being at church all day where they don't want to be in front of everybody either.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my daughter loves to be in front of
Yes.
people, but
I was going to
even
say it is
like,
the personality type.
yes, but like there are a few instances where it's just like, oh, sometimes it's nice to not be the center of attention because when you
Mm-hmm.
are staff kids, people do look at you and they do look at the girls and they do pay attention to what they're wearing and if they have shoes on or
Yeah.
if their clothes are too tight. It's like, oh, she needs the next size up. And you're like, yeah, I totally understand, but this is all we had in our drawer this morning.
But we put it on today and learned it right when she put it on. So we came
Yes.
anyway. Yeah.
And so it is just like you are in the spotlight, whether you want to be
Right.
or not.
So true.
And so to give kids kind of an option to step away from that, even if it's just for a service, I think can be really beautiful because I think they're feeling the pressure. I think a lot of kids grow up in ministry and they're like, I was always the center of attention. I was always being looked at. People were always watching my every move and I felt like I had to be perfect. And I think we as parents and people in ministry can continue to fight against that and say, hey, no, they're kids. They're going to run around and they're going to laugh and they're going to have fun with their friends and they're going to say silly things and they're learning and growing. I mean, that's so much of what we're even focusing on with my 7-year-old of just like, you're learning, I'm learning, we're all learning how
Mm-hmm.
to handle these things and it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy. And I think it's just like, model the messiness of motherhood and parenting and through it all, you can depend on God to help you. And so it's just a good reminder to do that. I want to talk about the hard parts of ministry, because sometimes it's really nice when everything is going well in your church and your kids are loved, your kids are known, and you're having a great time. It's a great season. But then there's also seasons that you just wish your kids didn't have to experience, because you don't want it to change the way they view the local church.
Mm-hmm.
And we have both been through hard seasons in ministry. By God's kindness, my oldest was really little and has no recollection of anything that happened. But how did you navigate, or how are you still navigating? What do you share? What do you try and hide? How have you walked through hard seasons of ministry with your girls who were so integrated into everything that you did? What did that look like?
This is a great question. I want to just say one other thing to what you were saying before with the kids going to my office. Um, every decision you make like that, you really don't know if it's right.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't know until later. But I'll tell you that another staff kid and Lindy became such good friends when we were at the church in Georgia. And I have so much footage of the videos and the little movies they made in my office that are just worth every time I let them hang out in there, Anyway,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the hard times, yeah, no, my kids didn't. They walked through a lot of it, and they've been the age of feeling it and seeing it. Some of the good ones too that are hard, but you have to do them in order for them to happen. It still feels like you're
Mm-hmm.
putting a burden on your kids, right? So us
Yeah.
moving from Southern California to Atlanta, Georgia, and the girls were like 4th, 5th, and 7th grade, or maybe just the year before that when we moved there. But pulling them out of where they're known, the schools that they knew, and then putting them into this place that was completely different, trusting God, putting, repeating over and over again in your head, kids are resilient, but they carry stuff. So let's watch what they're
Yeah.
experiencing as they are resilient, and it's a part of growing up, and all of those things you tell yourself in order to get through it. And we only got to stay in Atlanta for 2 years. It was a little bit less than 2 years, but it was still such a sweet time that they all can look back on it now and say, we're so glad we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But then leaving Atlanta and coming back to California was a whole other step. And we've had times in churches where our season was coming to an end. And sometimes God has to really show that to you in some not fun things.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be loyal and you want to stick around and but then it's like, okay, we can't. And having to walk the girls through that, and having to walk them through seasons in life where the church can come around you too when you're having a hard season at home, and then for the church to come around you. I would say that my desire was always for my kids to love Jesus, to fall in love with Jesus and love Jesus. It was, I did have to tell them the church is a whole bunch of humans that are going to make mistakes. I had to reiterate that. Hate that I had to do that, but I did. And I will say, my girls love Jesus, but my girls struggle with the church, which I think is a lot of people's journey.
Mm-hmm.
My confidence is in the fact that they love Jesus. I'm like, whatever, yes, they're missing out on fellowship, and some of them are in some ways, or yes, they're missing out on growing in this kind of a way, but it's also a season. And I've had to walk through so many seasons with the church and seasons with them that I have to sit in that. Do I pray for them every day? Absolutely. Do I desire more for them? Absolutely. But I'm older than them. And the more that I desire for them are things that I know, but I learned through life. So, so I would say, as a mom, journeying with them, listening has been huge.
Mm-hmm.
Not letting them be on their own journey. I know we always say that, oh, I found my own faith instead of my parents' faith, right? That's
Right.
part of everyone's story. And not everyone, I'm being over dramatic, which I've already shared that I'm dramatic, so everyone can just deal with that. But the idea of the journey not being black or white, or am I allowed to ask this question? Absolutely. And my reaction and my choice to react and my listening is what is going to make the difference for Christ in your life. It's not me forcing you, telling you that because you don't go to church every Sunday or you only serve at church. My girls have gone through seasons now as young adults where they come to church and they serve, but they don't sit through the message. Different seasons. They go to the young adults service and they call that their service. They go to, oh my goodness, we had a season. Oh, this was a tough one for my husband and I to navigate back then. We had so the one who's is very extroverted. I worked at one church and then my husband worked at another church and she went to a third church. So on Sunday nights, I would drive her to this other church. She was very involved in the youth group at the church I went to. She went on Sundays and attended and served and everything. And yet she still wanted to attend the youth group at another church. And when people asked her, what church do you go to? The answer was not dad's church or mom's church. It was this other church. And it was like, wait, God, how does this work? So to come to another season of realization that the Big C church is impacting my daughter and she wants to be at several, no arguments here.
Yeah.
And she can tell them whatever church is hers is fine. But it was a mom moment where I was like, who's that going to sound like to people? What is that going to look like? She doesn't, to the church I work at, if she tells that to them, to the whatever. And I just had to this is her journey. I drove her there every Sunday night. And this is what we did for that whole season. And she would go to camp with all three churches. Like, I know. But how can I argue that? Like, how much Jesus is this kid going to get? Let's bring it on. So.
Yeah. Yes. Sign her up. She's going to everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so good. And I don't know. I just think the world puts a lot of expectations on moms in general. So there's that side of things. And then there's this expectation of being in ministry and what that looks like. And I feel like sometimes it's important to just turn off the noise a little bit and say, my life is not going to look like this family in ministry. It's not going to look like these people on social media. And every
There's
family
a lot
makes
more noise than there was when I was, raising my kids. But yeah.
And there's a lot of decisions. Like some people are like, there are people listening who they're homeschooling their kids full time and working in ministry. And there's bivocational and there's full-time ministry people who are still trying to raise their kids. And it kind of is this, wherever you feel discernment on the decision that you're going to make, it's what's the main point? You want your kids to experience Jesus, and you want your kids to grow in their knowledge of God and his word, and you want their hearts to be transformed by the gospel. That can look a number of different ways. It doesn't have to look like putting your kids in this private school or homeschooling your kids full time or whatever the decision you're coming up against. And so I think when we think about motherhood as a whole, when it comes to ministry, it is like, hey, every season will look different. And there's a number of seasons that you'll walk through, whether it's like we're coming up on summer season. Summer looks very different if you have kids at home. And it's like your capacity and your ability to do things will look very different in this season. And so it's okay to go year by year and season by season and show your kids what it looks like to be dependent on God in all that you do. And so I think it's extremely hard. And I wish there was like a we have all the answers.
Right. Well, I would say in this last season, we've had a tough last couple of years that the girls have had to navigate conversations with a lot of people and with God and with me. And what I learned by even telling myself, oh, I'm going to listen well, or I'm going to react well, or all these little things that I did, I learned that I have made a choice to be real with them,
Mm-hmm.
just to what their brains can handle. When they're really little, you only are real with them to, this much. And now as young adults, I have to show them with words and with actions and with steps what it means to walk this life with Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and to not put my perspective on all the people around me, because the people around me are going to be constantly failing me, constantly uh, breaking down. As me, I am too. But when you like you were saying with that, listening to all the noise, um, noise can sound like really wise people
Mm-hmm.
who are sharing great wisdom. I prayed for that a lot. Like, Lord, please put wise people around me to share and invest in me and my family and my kids. But then how do you filter
Yeah.
what is actually wise for you or what was wise for them?
Mm-hmm.
How do you, and I know, so again, going back to my gut, being the Holy Spirit, that's what I would do. I would listen to everyone. I would wrestle internally with everything. I would wrestle with my decisions. I would wrestle with the things that people said I should do. My
Mm-hmm.
mother's voice was very loud. It's still very loud today. Very wise, very wise. But then, wait a second, God, you've called me to parent these kids. Okay, listen, and then actually ask him what it is exactly you're supposed to implement and you're supposed to do
Yeah.
for your kids, for your family, for your seasons, for your tough times in the church, for your great times in the church, for your hard decisions. We pulled our kids out of the Christian school at the church and moved them to Atlanta, Georgia, and dropped them in public schools for the first time in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Trusting God with that. Oh my goodness. Hello. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to put them in a bubble. I wanted to keep them in a bubble. I wanted to, you know, um,
Yeah.
I explored homeschooling when they were very little, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And I put them in the school that was going to be like a charter. And then all of a sudden God dropped, nope, you're going full-time in ministry. Oh, and I put them into, mainstream school. Like, it's not just about what you desire and what you are like, I want to stand firm on this. It's about
Mm-hmm.
walking this journey with God and
Yeah.
trusting him. Now my girls have a core that I could not have ever done on my own. They're very smart, and yet they are very in tune to the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm grateful for. I think that's probably most important is knowing and listening to the Holy Spirit, not the outward walk of attending church. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but I do know that having faith and trusting is going to get you through a lot of decisions as a mom through all the different seasons, and then acting on things and being willing to make mistakes and tell your kids you made a mistake. We tried
Mm-hmm.
that, did not work out. Let's go back and do it again. Let's try again. You said that to your mom. That does not work out. That is not what you are. Oh, I am a
Yeah.
firm believer in choosing things to say to your kids that are regular sayings. A lot of times when I left my kids through all of these different seasons, it was make a good choice. Make a good choice.
Uh-huh.
Well, we talked about at home what good choices were. We knew what it was,
Yeah.
but I wanted them to hear it inside of themselves and trust the Holy Spirit. So it was make a good choice, make a good choice. And then they got to the point where they'd come home and go, oh, I did not make a good choice today. And look what happened. Right. So it was
Yeah.
a choice. It wasn't you are a good person or a bad person. Right.
Yeah.
And so, so it was an honor to be It is an honor. It's an honor to be a mom to these
Yeah.
amazing girls, but also to invest in and love on and nurture other moms too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's good. Okay, really quick. Do you have like a highlight? I didn't ask you this ahead of time, so you might have to think a little bit. But do you have a moment that sticks out of like, oh, this is one of the best moments of doing ministry with my girls? There's probably so many.
there's so many. Oh, okay, one that comes into my mind. This is not a best moment, but I'm just going to share a couple so that we can find the best one.
Okay.
Okay. One of the stories that is written in my little purple book is when um, one of my kids was in Little Steps, was the program that your mom was involved
Uh-huh.
in too. Yes, and your mom got to invest in my kids the same that I got to invest in you. Anyway, we have so many
Mm-hmm.
mom stories. Um, I I sent the little, oh, I feel like I'm not going to think of any of the words, the little cheese that's in the red container.
Oh, the
My
like Baby
daughter
Bell
took it.
cheese?
Yes. And my daughter took it, and when she opened it, it had some green on it. So she showed her teacher and said that has green on it. And the teacher said, "Oh, it's still okay. You can eat it." And my daughter actually said the words to the teacher, "No, God told me that it's not okay to eat that." And it was like,
Oh.
so funny that the teacher shares that with me later, but my child used God to not have to eat cheese. Granted, it did have green on it, but still, right? Learning to listen, but okay. Anyway, I mean, we're talking Little Steps was preschool, so she was
Mm-hmm.
very, very
They were
young. So
little.
I need to give that context there. It wasn't like they were 14 and they chose to use God like that. Okay. Um, I think some of my best memories were my kids even sitting on the steps in Coast Hills and just loving being there
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to run around, but then they would sit and they would wait. I remember waiting for my mom at church, and I even tease kids nowadays, "Oh, your mom's one of the talkers. It's fine. Hang out with me for a little while, let her talk. It's great. It's important to talk at church." But just watching my girls get loved on by so many people,
Mm-hmm.
instead of that guilt feeling of, "Oh my goodness, we're there all the time," looking at it like, wow, look at how many people are investing in them.
Yeah.
The sticky faith, the 5 people. My kids had way more than 5 people.
Yeah.
And to trust that and to know we were always at church. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
always at church. They come, they still
Right.
help at church. Um, it's a part of their growing up and a part of their memory. And I'm glad that I didn't fight it as, "Oh dear, we are there too much."
Right.
The stereotypical PK who grows
Yeah.
up to rebel, all of those things. I didn't listen to any of that
Mm.
noise, because God called me to be here right now. And
Yeah.
yes, like you said, balance. Absolutely. I strove for balance, like at the beginning of our talk. And I was very intentional about it. My
Mm-hmm.
girls were going to be my first priority. They knew that.
Yeah.
They knew that them being at the church was because it was important, but that if they were sick, I'd be home with them.
Yeah.
If they were up all night, I'd be with them, sitting right next to them. Oh, okay. I thought of it.
Okay, go for it.
Every one of my girls, somehow, when they were sick, when they were hurting, when something was coming up, every one of them would whisper to me, "Will you please pray for me, Mom?"
Hmm.
That's one of the things that has filled my heart even to this day. They still say it. "I have to do this big thing. I don't think I can get it done today. Will you just pray for me, Mom?" I mean, I get phone calls from where they are, and they'll say, "Oh my goodness, I'm scared. I don't want to go in. I don't want to do what I
Mm-hmm.
have to do next. Can you just pray for me?" And that is worth all of it. They've seen me pray for
Yeah.
1 million people, and they know that's what I do, and they know that they would be my top priority of praying for. And so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for asking
That's
that.
sweet.
That
That's sweet.
is.
Okay, if you were to give one piece of encouragement to a mom who might be sitting in the tension of, I want to walk in obedience and what God's asking me to do, but I feel like I should be home, or I want to raise my kids, or I feel this tension of just all the things that being a mom in ministry entails. What encouragement, like one final piece of encouragement, what would it be?
Um, I would say to notice. Of course, I can say, hey, find a church where family is a priority and they will just let you be family first. Find, all of that. But a lot of times people are called to church and they
Mm-hmm.
are asked to work there. So I would say, notice God. And it has
Yeah.
to be a practice that you do. You have to notice that, that people love to find my daughter's shoes,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to look at it that way. Instead of
Yeah.
every time somebody brings me her shoes, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Abby, you should always have your shoes on. Why did you leave your... Notice that God is providing by having someone find your shoes. Love that they know your daughter. Love they know her. That I always had to look at it in a different perspective and
Mm-hmm.
say, oh my goodness, this is a God moment. And notice God providing and taking care of you and your kids and your family. Because
Yeah.
it's harder to see that. It's easier to see all of the people's judgment.
Yeah.
This is what your kids should be doing at church. This is how they should be acting. So you have to make it a practice to notice when God is providing and God has called you to this and he is going to take care of them. They are his.
Mm-hmm.
They're a gift to us for a season. Yes, we do our best. I think for me, that's something else that I've journaled and just been so intentional about. When I'm scared, when I'm moving my kids across the country, when I'm worried about them or the friends they're hanging out with or the friends they're going to make or I will notice when they say one thing to me about God and go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he still has them. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the word that
Yeah.
comes to mind is notice. Notice God in all of it.
That's so good. Nancy, okay. This was great. I'm like, how do we wrap this up? Because we could keep talking about all the things.
Yes.
But why don't you tell people, you did not tell people your other job at the beginning.
Yes.
So
Yes.
why don't you tell people your other job, and if they want to continue to learn from you or talk with you or all the things, talk
Or
about where they
find
can be, where they,
their next
yes, or where they
place in
can connect
ministry.
with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I do work full time at a church, but I have a little side ministry job with a Slingshot Group. So I place kids pastors and student ministry pastors all over the country at churches. So we're a search firm for churches. So if you want to reach me, it's my first initial, my last name, and then at slingshotgroup.org. You can find me at Slingshot Group. It's Slingshot Group, though. That's what you have to look up
Yep.
because there's a lot of other Slingshot things. But so, yeah, if you're just looking for me, it's Slingshot Group. And I coach, I encourage, if you're in a church and you're like, I don't know how to get to the next level, I could support you. And, or if you want to be a candidate for us and look for your next ministry role, reach out to me.
Awesome. We'll link all the
Thank you.
things in the show notes so people can go there to
Oh, okay.
find more information about
Of
you, about
course.
Slingshot, and all the fun things. Nancy, thank you so much for being on the
Thank
podcast today.
you. Thanks for inviting me and wanting to talk about being a mom in ministry. I love it.